This is the Kawai K3, a digital analog hybrid synthesizer first released in 1986. It features 6 voices, 33 digital waveforms, an analog SSM filter, and a sleek and easy-to-use interface. Join me for a review as we take a deeper look at this classic vintage hybrid synth, which can still create many great sounds today. So this is the Kawai K3. This is a very sleek-looking digital analog hybrid synth released in 1986, one of the first from Kawai in this hybrid architecture at the time. It was competing with other synths such as the Korg DW8000, another hybrid, as well as, of course, the Yamaha DX7, the JX8P, and the Roland Alpha Juno. It has 6 voices, it has analog filters and analog VCAs, and of course digital waveforms that gives it a nice icy sort of dark quality, as well as PPG-ish types of tones. So today I thought I would take you through this synth in a bit more depth. We'll listen to some sounds a little bit later, and then I'll give you my final thoughts towards the end. So let's just take a look at this synth in a bit more depth. So as you can see, there's no knobs anywhere, there's no sliders anywhere, it's just basically one big alpha dial to control the various parameters. And in the middle here is the actual membrane buttons where you sort of select each function that you want to edit individually. You've got the oscillator section, there's 2 oscillators on board, digital waveforms. The VCF section here, which has cutoff, resonance control, and an envelope as well. There's a VCA section here where you can control the level of the VCA, and it also has its own envelope. There's a single LFO on board where you can control the shape and route that to the oscillator, the filter, or the VCA, and adjust the speed accordingly. Over here is the touch sensitivity section, so you can adjust aftertouch pressure, route that to the filter, to the VCA, as well as velocity sensitivity. And in addition, there's something really cool here, which is aftertouch to oscillator balance, so you can morph between the 2 oscillators, which is pretty cool. To the right of that is the keyboard tracking section for both the VCF as well as the VCA. And then lastly, there is the chorus section. So there's 7 different types of effects here, 6 chorus types, and 1 delay. To the right of that is the master section where you can get into like MIDI, sysx, things of that nature, you know, storing patches, loading patches if you need to. And as well, if you wanted to edit, there is a single waveform here for additive synthesis on board. You can configure that in this section as well. To the left over here is where you can select between presets or the actual editing functions, as well as enabling Portamento or mono mode for Unison types of patches, as well as selecting between internal or cartridge. With that said, now let's take a listen to some of the basic wave shapes. So there's a sine, a saw, as well as a square wave that's on board. So this is the sine wave. We're listening to a single oscillator at this stage. So that's the sine. This is the sawtooth. And then we have the square wave. In addition to these basic wave shapes, you also have white noise. Great to have that on board. And then you have this additive waveform, which you can edit through this interface. It is a bit complicated, but there are, I believe, third-party software editors to manipulate this if you needed to. Now, moving on from this section here, we get into some of the other digital waveforms. There's a number of other wave shapes on board. So you can obviously mix and match depending on what you like. And that's just the single oscillator here. So of course it also has a range. So currently at 8 feet, 4 feet, 8, 16. But let's bring in the second oscillator now. Now, what's great with this second oscillator, you can tune it, of course, all the way down to 24, 12, or 24. Let's bring it down to 12 here. And let's detune it slightly. Let's select some other waveforms. So you can mix and match. You can also adjust things like Portamento here, so we'll enable a Portamento. Great to have that on board. You can also enable a mono mode. To beef up your sound, you can do that as well. Moving into the filter section now, this is the cutoff control. And resonance, which thins out the sound and then kicks in at the top. There is stepping, unfortunately. And we have envelope control. You also have, in addition to this, a low cut, which is actually a high pass filter. So that's nice to have on board as well. All right, so let's look at the VCA section here. We have level control. We also have an envelope. So you can have pads that fade in. Or short. There is also an LFO that's on board here as well. So we can have that routed, first of all, to the oscillator and the speed. Sine wave. It does not go into audio rate. We also have sawtooth. As well as reverse sawtooth. Square. Inverted square. And then we have sample and hold. And lastly, chromatic stepping sample and hold. So some interesting shapes there, and that's just routed to the oscillator. We can also route this to the VCF. Like so, or to the VCA for tremolo effects. I'm going to now look at the touch sensitivity section. So this is quite handy to have. So we have control over velocity to the filter. So we can enable that. So depending on how hard I press, it will open the filter accordingly. Velocity to VCA for volume. And we have aftertouch control as well. So pressure to the filter. Pressure to VCA if we need. And one of the coolest features on this synth is pressure to oscillator balance. It'll crossfade between the two oscillators. So that's a great feature. And then lastly here we have pressure to route the LFO to the oscillator itself. For some vibrato. All right, we do have keyboard tracking for the filter and the VCA, as I mentioned. And then we get to the effects. So there's multiple types of chorus here, so let's enable this. And this is where this synth really starts to shine, in my opinion. The chorus really helps give it some stereo width and brings in some nice sort of movement to these digital waveforms. Right? Sounds pretty nice. So that's the first chorus. This is the second chorus. Third. Fourth, tremolo. Fifth. Sixth. And then 7, which is actually a sort of delay, very short delay. So that is the effects, and essentially that is the nature of the synth here in a nutshell. Now there is, as I mentioned, this waveform under waveform 32. This is the additive waveform. And there is a function in here under harmonic where you can select the different harmonic intervals and adjust. There should be some software editors out there to edit this a bit more in depth through the computer. So that is the Kawai K3. It is, as you can tell, quite nice for sort of pads, dark, sort of icy tones, and even some PPG-ish types of sounds. Let's now take a listen to some of these sounds in a bit more depth. I'll play you some patches and presets that come with the synth, as well as some noodling that I've done on my own. And then I'll come back after that and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed some of those sounds. So I wanted to talk a bit more now about some of the things I like about the Kawai K3, some of the things I don't like about it, and I'll give you my final thoughts towards the end. So, first of all, what do I like about this synth? Well, it has 33 different waveforms, digital, of course, including noise, as well as an additive waveform, which you can edit depending how you program it. So it actually is decently flexible in the hybrid arena, especially from 1986. And it really excels, I find, in these sort of dark sort of pads and basses or sort of icy soundscapes. And if you're looking for, as well, PPG-ish types of tones, this is a decent synth that sort of approximates that, depending on the waveforms that you've selected. It also has that SSM filter, a very nice sounding filter, which is in this synth. It's also shared, of course, with the Poly 6 that has that filter as well, and a couple other Kawai models. The SX210 has that filter as well, so a very nice sounding filter that's in this synth. It is fairly easy to edit, despite the appearance of these membrane panels. You know, you basically select one button and then just adjust it with the dial. It's fairly quick and easy. That's something I really enjoy when editing the synth. It might look a little bit intimidating, but it's actually quite simple and fast. The key bed, it supports velocity as well as aftertouch, which is great, especially for a synth from 1986. Great to have that on board as well. As well, the ability to control things like oscillator balance, depending on aftertouch pressure. It's sort of a unique feature here, especially from back then. I haven't seen that very often. And just another nice enhancement that Kawai put in here for us to use. It does support MIDI. It has MIDI in-out through on the back. There are a number of different chorus modes, as you saw, so not just one standard chorus, which is great. And of course, the additive synthesis aspect for one of those waveforms gives you a little bit more extra flexibility if you need it. Now, some things that I'm not so fond of with the Kawai K3. First of all, there's only a single LFO on board. Unfortunately, that is somewhat limited, but this was not designed to be a huge modulation monster. Thankfully, you can route it to the oscillator, the filter, and the VCA. So it does give you some flexibility there, but it's still a single LFO, and it also does not go into audio rate. So, I did mention, of course, this synth does have aftertouch. I do find it to be a bit stiff. But, you know, it could also be due to age. A few other things here. There's no ARP. There's no sequencer on board. There is no ring modulation. There is no oscillator sync. There's no pulse width modulation. And there are obviously no knobs or sliders to manipulate in real time, aside from this alpha dial. The additive oscillator is great to have on board. It is a bit complex and fiddly. Maybe spend some time with the manual if you really want to get into it, or get a third-party editor. But it's not as intuitive as I expected. And the filter, yes, it's a nice, beautiful sounding SSM filter, but it has stepping, and it only sort of activates at full resonance at the highest level. It just sort of churns on, right? It's not a smooth transition, which is a little bit unfortunate. The resonance as well for that filter, as I mentioned, it does drop the volume out. It thins out the sound. And lastly, there is no mod wheel. There's only a pitch wheel here. So those are the things I'm not very fond of with this synth. Now, that all said, this is quite a nice looking and decently nice sounding digital analog hybrid from the mid-80s that I think is still worth picking up today. It has its own unique tone. And it sort of flies under the radar a lot. It's kind of obscure. I don't know how many were produced, but they are out there on the secondhand market if you are interested in picking one up. And one thing I should mention, which is a great feature, you can expand this up to 12 voices. There is polychaining on this synth, which is super cool. It's called spillover. There's a function in here called spillover, and you can connect it to another K3M rack and get up to 6 additional voices for more polyphony. Very forward thinking at the time. So if you like sort of dark or PPG-ish types of tones, this might be the synth for you. I've had this synth for a number of years. I've always enjoyed noodling on it. And if you check out some of my older videos, you'll see that I've created some actual ambient performances with this synth, where these sort of icy tones come through, nice pads, and it just has a nice sort of overtone to it. So, I think if this type of hybrid interests you from that era, definitely keep your eyes open. Kawai K3 is a great digital analog hybrid synth from that era, despite some of its shortcomings. So, thank you very much for watching today. I appreciate your support. Hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough and review. This sort of classic digital analog hybrid synth from Kawai. Please leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think of this vintage hybrid synth. And I'll see you again soon.